Yesterday, though, the question was asked about tracking things and staying up with things. And so I gave you a copy of something that many people have asked me about over time. One is just my note-taking sheet, and the other one is a pioneering kind of seminar that I did entitled A Day for Ministry Focus. And I just want to put that in your hands and let you kind of think about it a little bit. I'm not sure when and how and why I discovered it, but as I mentioned yesterday, that if I take good notes and can access those notes, I'm often the smartest person in the room. Had a college professor at Cal State in California one time who said, "You're conscientious, and so I know that you're going to succeed in this class." In this class I was not very good at. And so there's something about developing a habit of learning. I'm a writing learner. And so over time I've learned to be a writing learner. And because of the fact that I'm multitasking, I think about too many things at the same time, it's helpful for me personally to be forced to write things down. I write best when I write with a pen, not when I type with a keyboard, because I can type too fast. I can type 90 words a minute sometimes if I'm really just cranking and flying and spell checks is fixing everything. But if I'm writing, I'm slowing down enough to really engage and focus. I love bicycling and motorcycling and flying airplanes, because when you do those three things, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. Well, taking notes helps me to pay attention. And so I do my best coaching and mentoring even at the doctoral level by doing it on the telephone so that I can just constantly be taking notes. And that's what is very effective for my style. And so this particular sheet that I gave you is something that I live by. I will take copious notes, and then I will use this sheet, and I'll use the action items in the far left to get my attention. And so just because most of my notes have private thoughts about different people, I just kind of show you how this goes. You can see this is one example of my coaching certification. I've been through 3 of them in February of 2010. And you see that I circle the ones that are important. I put here that, here's just a key idea, and I put someplace else, aha. And so all I have to do is to find this. So what I do is I take my handwritten notes and I scan them to email, and then I save them in my Google Drive folder, and I have a way of naming things so I can search by name. If it's notes, my files just say notes, comma, and like we say notes, comma here, coaching certification, and then the date. And so if I'm searching, all I got to do is, I can't remember what I called it, but I know it was coaching. And then I can search, I think it was in 2010, then it's pretty easy to find stuff. So this kind of system has worked well for me. And then I had, at one time, I had 3 Doctor of Ministry students that I was doing face-to-face mentoring and coaching, and they were kind of struggling with their day-to-day work. So they asked me, can you put something together and teach us how to manage data? And so I've given you just my notes copy of the little seminar that I put together, A Day for Ministry Focus, Planning and Monitoring Essential Ministry Projects. And so since I went to the trouble of putting this together, instead of just doing it for my 3 students, I opened it up to the association, and some people from the office in Vancouver came. We had about 45 or 47 people that day. It was quite a strong and good seminar. And so built into these 9 pages of notes are some hits and pieces and suggestions and some tricks that I've learned. The one thing I would call attention to is you need to figure out some system that works for you and put everything in one place. So if you do anything digitally, everything needs to be digital, or it needs to all be printed. Don't have digital in one place and print in another place. Put it all in one place. So either print out everything that you type in, or scan everything that you write out. For me, it works best to scan everything that I write out. You need to know what is key information. In this document, it tells you, gives you my suggestions of what is key information and a lot of varieties of things that relate to it. So if you want to talk to me privately about that, at another time, I'm very happy, to do that. I was on a train going from Oxford, England to London and talking to a key national Black Baptist pastor who's just one of the brightest guys I have ever met. And he said to me, Ron, you need to learn to rest your mind. And so he knew me well enough, because we'd been in a couple weeks of seminars in Oxford. He knew me well enough to see what my strengths were, but he was beginning to recognize my weaknesses, which was his polite way of saying, now go rest so I can spend time talking to my wife. As we were on this train, it headed from point A to point B. And so he was aware of me and demonstrated great skill on how a friend, or in our case, a coach, can come alongside somebody and say, you have great strengths, but you also have some weaknesses. Let me be a friend to you and ask questions that help you discover. And if you don't discover it easily, then give me permission to be a little more directive and let me help you. Let me be a friend to you. Some interesting things about coaching. It's hard to be a coach of someone that you supervise. If you have some full or partial responsibility in a supervisory capacity, it's hard to be a coach. And so if you have an intern in your church, or an associate, or you have an apprentice, it's hard for you to coach them when you're also the supervisor. And that kind of relates to our question, can a mentor be a coach? Yes, if they don't have formal responsibilities. And so there are a lot of things like that that need to guide us, but what we're getting to this morning is how our personality affects that. In the same way that if I have a role, that keeps me from doing certain things with you, but if I have a certain personality type, that affects how I do things with you and how much I should try. And so we're going to take a look at this section on coaching and your personality, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your DISC profiles, and just kind of have some fun here this morning. You should be on the page that says coaching and your personality. And basically the DISC Classic that you took last night is designed to measure 4 basic characteristics and see how those interplay with one another, and we'll show you how those can affect. If you have your DISC Classic profile, take that in hand as well. Now, the DISC Classic is a trait analysis. It is not a behavior analysis. That's very important. DISC is a trait analysis, not a behavior analysis. Just because you have a trait doesn't mean you're going to live out that trait. Sometimes we behave in concert with who we are, sometimes we don't. How you behave may relate to your stress or your energy or some of those kinds of things. Also, like any test, you don't want to take it too seriously, because this is simply a time-based snapshot in a specific environment. So wherever you were when you took this last night, whatever frame of mind you were in, whether you were tired or rested, if you were hungry or you ate too much, I mean, there's a lot of factors that could even shape how you took this test last night. So the way to know if you have ever taken a good test is you kind of need to take 3 different tests at 3 different times and get the similar or same results to know if any one of the tests was even a good test. So don't take this too seriously. And again, remember, this is for our purposes, and the way it's really designed is a learning instrument. It's not a clinical test. My doctorate is a clinical track, Doctor of Ministries degree, with specialty work in psychotherapy, and I have some other specialized training that I won't mention since this is being videoed. And so I kind of get the psychosocial aspect of this, the psychology of it, the humanity of it, and I try to integrate that with how I am wonderfully and fearfully made and shaped by God because of the parents He gave me, by God because of the parents He gave me and where they lived and how they raised me. And so this is really just to help you understand your own behavior a little bit based on the analysis, even though it's not a behavior analysis. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. And it's to help you learn when you should adapt and how you should adapt. Some of us are more adaptable than others. Don't presume that because someone is a non-Anglo-American who has successfully learned a second language that they are an adaptable person. It may not be. They may just be really smart. It'll also help you improve your communication. One of the key things that the DISC will do is help you appreciate the differences. We're going to emphasize that as part of our discussion this morning. And one of the things that is helpful in ministry, no matter what you're doing, it'll help you reduce conflict. I'm working with a guy right now in the city of Seattle who is a key national leading person in his field. And he is a high C. And as a high C, he just has trouble saying yes to anything because it's not quite exactly right how he has been trained to do that has saved lives, over the decades. And so there's a certain way it's got to be done because he's a high C. And so I recognize that it's not that he is being disagreeable, it's that he's concerned for the safety and well-being of people, and he doesn't want someone to be injured or lose their life by the decisions he makes. And so he just is really focused as a super duper, high C. Well, I'm not a high C, although I can be a C, but it helps me appreciate how to work with him. So if you look inside at the charts are just really helpful for you in that they tell you a little bit about yourself. On page 5, graph 1, this is kind of your public self. This is your public self. This is how you perceive others expect you to be and to act. And in some ways, you could even say that this is your mature self at your best. So graph 1 is you in public. It is probably a mature version of you. Graph number 2 is how you are under pressure. And this is your instinctive response. This is your fight or flight type response. And so if you're one way in public, but another way when you're under a lot of pressure and your instinctive responses, then people are not sure, exactly who you are and how you are. And in one sense, we could say potentially that graph number 2 is your immature self. So graph 1 is your public self and a mature self, and number 2 is you under pressure and your immature self. Graph number 3 is actually your typical, real behavioral style. Now this is a trait analysis, not a behavior analysis, but your real behavior will come out as reflected in this graph here. And so you want to kind of look at and see how different are those 3 graphs and what does that tell you about you. And if one is extremely different from another, be worth talking a little bit more about that. Why is it? Why is that? Did you take a bad test, or are you such a people pleaser, or what's going on that you're not consistently who you are? Now people that are high D's and high I's, they tend to be active, fast-paced, bold, assertive, and dynamics. People who are high D's and or high C's, they ask a lot of questions, they're logic-focused, on reason, they want to deal with ideas and facts. People that are high I's and or high S's, they tend to be accepting, people focused on relationship and concerned, and sometimes unduly concerned about how people feel about things. And then people that tend to be a high C and or a high S, they tend to be thoughtful, to move at a more moderate pace. Their thought is systematic, they're calm, and they're very, very careful. And so those are just some broad strokes and generalities as we're beginning to look at this. So I'm a high D, except on those occasions when I'm a high I. One time I test, it'll be a D. The next time I test, it'll be a high I. But 3 out of 5 times I come out as a high D, and only 2 out of 5 times do I come out as a high I. And so my D can be up here and my I can have a gap down here at times, and that's pretty typical. And then there are times when my I can be up here and my D is a little bit lower. So even though there are times that I'm an ID and not a DI, even when I'm an ID, my D is still pretty strong. So it's pretty consistent that most of the time in most situations I am a high D. And I can often be a high I, but I also come in the third ranking as a high C. And so that just that gives a little bit of my trait analysis that does lead to my behavior, even though it's not measuring my behavior. So share with me a little bit, what are you guys? What are you as far as what is your number one, your highest indicator? And there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer to this.
I'm a high S.
You're a high S.
I've always been a high S.
And you're married to a high
High D.
A high D. I figured that one out. What are you? What's your highest mark?
I'm sorry, I guess lost the definition.
Yeah, are you, on the chart, are you a high D, I, S, or C?
D stand for.
Did you get it? Oh, you didn't complete it yet. Okay. Okay. Juan, what are you?
I'm a high I.
A high I. And Steve?
Me too, I'm a high I.
Oh, you guys must have some interesting discussions. Ruth,
Yes.
you're in high S? Really?
Real.
S and C are kind of about the same.
Okay. And what are you? You're a high I? Okay, very good. There's no right or wrong answer. Brian, you're a high C a lot of the time? Yeah. I'm a high D in secondary I. Gary Irby is a high I and a secondary D. And Brian is a high C. Brian brings out the best in Gary and Ron. The thing that's missing on our team right now is we don't have a high S. And we really need a fourth person on our team anyways. And the person we need, we don't need another Gary or Ron, that's for sure. We might get by with another Brian, but we really need a high S. We need somebody that's kind of a steady person. I'll go out and solve problems and sometimes solve them too quickly. Gary will go out and start something, and then go start something else, and go start something else. Brian will bring to the conversation the positives and the negatives, and he'll say, this is good, but. And we need the good, but discussions. And he can be very, very careful about looking at the consequences. Brian's the kind of guy that will save your life if you're on the mission field, or doing something that maybe you shouldn't do. Brian's the kind of guy that could save your job if you would let him. So if you're in trouble, listen to Brian. Gary and I will get you in trouble. And so this is just, some fun ways of looking at it. It's interesting that our North American Mission Board is almost overwhelmingly a high S. Okay? And as a high S, they have particular things that they like to do. And so we're often kind of trying to do something creative, and our North American Mission Board that we're primarily accountable to is kind of focusing on being steady in how we do things. No, we need to be creative, let's go get this done. And so look back on the coaching and personality. I give you some thoughts from the document. You look at yourself a little bit, look at yourself a little bit more. D stands for dominance, making decisions, taking authority, managing trouble, and solving problems. Somebody has got to make a decision. Somebody has got to stand up and say, we're going to do this, we're done talking about it. Someone has got to figure out how to fix the problem. D's will tend to do that, and again, they do it best with the help of the C. Influencers, being articulate, contacting people, building enthusiasm, steadiness, demonstrating patience, helping others, calming the excitable. See, we need a steady person to calm things down. So, you get ramped up, and he brings you down to earth.
Like
Yeah.
5 times a day.
And and you need to get out and do something, so
Yes.
she gets you to do it.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
you got this
Exactly.
wonderful marriage of
Yeah.
ministry and roles and relationship.
And I tell you, until we understood this, it was not good.
It was not happy, huh?
No, we had a lot of conflict over this,
Yeah.
because,
But now we've come to rely on it, I think.
yeah,
We,
Yeah.
we, and I will sometimes stop and say, what will Eric think? Should I pause for a little? Should I not send that email?
And so, the classical pattern gives you a composite, and you read in your results the description of you. What does your classic pattern tell you about you? What's the descriptive of you in chart number 3, graph number 3? What's your classical pattern?
yes, something specifically.
Yeah, this share with,
The word that he comes up with.
correct, yes.
Inspirational.
You're inspirational. What are you, Eric?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're asking.
He didn't do that math.
Okay. Did you guys do yours? Yeah. What do you want?
I think I was a counselor.
You're a counselor? Yeah, I see it as that. And Steve, did you get yours?
Came out as more like a phaser color?
A Fraser?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we didn't do that.
You didn't get that one, okay. We'll do that, and then you can read in the back, a good general description of what you're probably like. You take the numbers, you graph the numbers, you find it, and then you go to the back, like it says promoter, practitioner, or perfectionist, or whatever you are, and then you go back and find the closest matching pattern, and then you kind of read a little bit about you. I'm results oriented, sometimes I come out as a developer, and this will tell you, a little more specifically about yourself. But turn the page and take a look a little bit at the different cultures. Every group has a culture, you just need to kind of be aware of that. Your leadership team on your church, the people that you're coaching, they're working within a leadership culture. And you see the strengths and the weaknesses and the assessment of the different cultures. You see what a D culture encourages, you see what a D culture frowns upon. So in our Puget Sound Metro Region staff team, we have primarily a D culture because of just who and what we are. And so you see what we encourage and what we reward, and you can see what we struggle with. And so we got to be careful that when we add an S to our culture, that we don't add an S that is slow about things, or we won't add to our team, may take a little bit away. You see the advantages of the D culture, you see the drawbacks. And over the next pages, I've given you that for the D, the I, the S, and the C. And it's very, very interesting to see what culture encourages what. And some ethnic cultures encourage one culture over another. What do Koreans and what do Vietnamese, what do Hispanics what culture do they tend to prefer?
Balanced culture.
It's
Would a lot of Asian cultures emphasize an S culture?
Yeah, that's
Cooperation, loyalty, humility, thoughtfulness, team focus? What kind of a culture do Hispanics tend to prefer? Brian, what's been your experience in multiple countries?
yeah. Our I culture, yeah, influence, yeah. Yes, I is what we're experiencing right now in the Northwest with Ivan.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
definitely. I and D,
yeah. I would say my perception is that D is pretty common for those Hispanics that I have been. But it's interesting that what's working best in our Hispanic culture here are I's. I don't know if Hispanics are changing over time, the way Asians are changing, the way people are changing, or if we're just in an area where an I culture is more effective, and God is giving us more I-oriented Hispanic leaders.
So, can I process with that for a second?
Yeah.
Do you have time to do that?
Oh, absolutely.
That's what we're
This
doing.
is your time.
So, are you saying that the D leader is more valued because grew up with maybe the Catholic background where the Catholic church told them what to believe and how to process and everything, and that's kind of the way that they've grown up, or previously, and now that's shifting this thinking, that thinking is shifting.
Mm.
I would have to say that I don't know because I'm not a qualified expert. What I can say is my experience as a Southern Californian, that we had a lot of Hispanic influence from Mexico that came out of Roman Catholicism, and that in their hierarchical denomination of trust your authority and do what they say, that showed up in how they laid bricks and how they cut grass and how they interacted, in other areas of life as well. That was my experience growing up and through my young adult years. And so I think that that's fair. And as there's a break free, from that a different kind of Hispanic culture is coming out of that I think is part of being free from hierarchical Roman Catholicism, limited opinion only. But you have so many different Hispanic countries that are kind of working together, they no longer can say what we used to say, that this is how Californians do it, this is how Texans do it, and one's right and one's wrong. No, we've learned how to work together. I think that as we become more aware of people different from us, that there's less of an emphasis on a culture or a language group is this way or another way. I'm seeing Koreans that are transforming before my eyes in the last several years. And so it's traits that are adaptable and changeable to some degree as people become better informed, I think.
Mm.
But again, D is not good nor bad. D is just D. I, S, and C, the same thing. What's bad is when you're an immature or dysfunctional D, I, S, or C. And we're going to focus on that as we wrap up here in a bit.
But is it not too, Ron, that when you look at these as far as the culture of the church, it's a reflection of the culture itself and how they look at leadership many times?
Yeah.
So that how leaders are in the culture will impact the leader culture in the church itself, or how the church works as well.
Right. And so there's a culture in a new church created by the planter. There's a culture in the church largely created by the senior leadership of the church. And for example, when a new leader goes into a church, the church expects that leader to act a certain way. And then if he doesn't, then some stuff is going on. For example, when I went to San Diego, there was a hierarchical, the pastor is the boss and the authority and the power culture, and although I'm a high D, that's not who I am. I'm more of a collaborator. I believe in cooperation and do better in an I culture than I do in a D culture, even though my gifting, I normally end up leading the culture as a D, but I prefer doing that in an I culture. I don't like D cultures that much. There's a place for them, but that's not my personal comfort level. So I like to be an I that protects an I as a D. And so I transitioned the culture of the church, and that was a little bit of a challenge for the church, and a little bit of a challenge for me. But if I was going to stay there as a pastor, I felt the value and the need of shaping the culture. And so those that were counseling me during those years, guys like Rick Warren's staff, and Doyle Braden, Rick's director of missions, and other people at State Convention, they had to be aware of my context a little bit. So that's why the culture of the person, the culture of where they're leading, can be helpful as we coach people. Is this making sense? The tracking?
Question,
Yes.
from your perspective, how's Korean churches, from your, after reading this, I have kind of my own idea, but what do you, as you see Korean church, how has, you say you see change before your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you have seen?
I think that Koreans and Slavics, Russians in particular, are among the most complicated and therefore difficult people on the face of the earth. You got that?
Amen.
And I would say that most Koreans don't know what is Korean culture. And I've heard many Korean leaders here at Puget Sound that have said that to me. One immigrant pastor who's fluent in English says, Ron, you understand Koreans better than Koreans understand Koreans. And I think that that's true to a degree because I'm objectively, on the outside. Koreans have a steady culture to them that's intermingled with a D leadership style
Right.
that manifests itself in a caustic high C way. And so I think, like I say, it's very complex and sophisticated. And I actually mean this as a compliment that Koreans and Russians are complicated. I'm not dissing them. I'm not putting them down. So what are your
But
thoughts?
how is that changing from years? I agree with your description of
Yeah,
they want steady,
yeah.
but they also want a dominant leader they want him to direct and they just want to follow.
And then when he doesn't direct the way they want, they become high C.
Yeah.
I see the pastors kind of easing off the throttle of their dominance a little bit. And I see them appealing for less caustic and difficult reactions. So I feel like the leaders and the people are kind of trying to come together. And as a byproduct, that they're having less conflict as a result. That's my opinion, and strictly as an outsider. Maybe an informed outsider and one that's heard a lot of confidential, things, but again, I'm still an outsider. You agree with that, Brian?
I think for the future generation of Korean Americans, though, the influence, the leader who exudes and has a dominant, basically influence will be a dominant trait to draw in and keep the next generation church. So it's going to have to move away from the steadiness and the dominant loyalty